Hi, and welcome to Code with Cisco. On this project, we're going to be building a custom Pomodoro timer using JavaScript. And within the JavaScript ecosystem, we're going to use Day.js, Howler.js, and React to build our application. If you're not familiar with the Pomodoro technique, it's a utility time management method that involves working in short, focused bursts followed by short breaks. So it really kind of helps out with trying to keep and maintain whenever you're trying to study or something. It also is a great tool to build your productivity and stay focused on your task. So for a student, somebody that's working corporate, or you're just trying to be a high performer, it's a really good tool to have in your arsenal. So, um, especially for people that get distracted like me. So, anyways, let's get started. So, first, you're going to want to set up your environment. So the way that I'm going to set up this environment is I'm using Windows 11. So if you have Windows 10 and any modern Windows operating system, you should be fine. It should be the same steps. If you have a Mac, it's pretty much the same. Linux, you may have to do just a little bit different. And I can go over setting up a Linux environment if you really need it. But I'm assuming most people that are going to take this course are just going to have Windows 10 or Mac or something like that. So um, first thing, what you're going to need to do is you need to have the Node.js environment. So if you just do a quick Google search, just go to Node.js, download LTS, and you should be able to follow along. And if you see, we're on 18.12 for this version. So if you're around this version, you should be fine. There's nothing really crazy that you're going to need as far as node compatibility goes. All right, so another one that I use is another tool that we use is Visual Studio Code. That's something that you want to have installed just because it makes life easier. And we're just going to use vanilla Visual Studio Code. Just need a environment that you can start coding in. All right, so what's another tool that we're going to need here? You have to be familiar with PowerShell, and um, PowerShell is this really cool tool. So if you just go to PowerShell, go to Windows, and just look up PowerShell, and you should have it right here. Um, oops. So as you can see, once you open up PowerShell, you're going to be in an environment. So this happens to be my code environment. So as long as you really need some simple commands that kind of navigate through this. So you just need ls to see what you're doing. And you can actually use Linux commands, and that's just because there's aliases on PowerShell. And if you're in a blank folder, just remember where you're at. So make sure that you can always navigate back. So if you want to navigate, for example, make a folder, I'm going to do mkdir, which is a make directory. And I'm going to call this one Pomodoro. Cool. And it'll create a new Pomodoro. It's the same thing if you're on Linux or Mac. You're essentially using the same bash environment. So these commands will work on a Mac as well if you're on a Mac. Cool. So once you have your new environment, you can type in ls and you'll your new folder, and you'll see that the directory structure for this folder code has a Pomodoro folder in there, which is cool. And you can also, if you're in Windows, you can type Explorer dot, and you can kind of view what you're actually doing right here. So that's pretty cool. And if you don't want to use a command line to create folders, that's fine. You could also use your Windows Explorer. But for all intents and purpose, I'm going to stick with using the command line. So feel free to follow along and use your File Explorer if you need to. Cool. So you installed Visual Studio Code, and you also installed Node.js. So now you should have all the tools that you need to start working. So you also want to install, well, not install, but kind of scaffold your React application. And the way that you're going to do that is using some npm commands. And that's why really need to be familiar, or at least somewhat familiar, with the command line. And we're just gonna use handy dandy Google, and we're gonna look for create React app. And I could just tell you this right off the top of my head, but it really helps if you're able to Google search some things, because there's some things that you're gonna get stuck on. So, and it's a really easy to start your create React app. So this one's using npx, so we'll go ahead and use npx since we have a npm version that can handle npx, and we'll do npx create. Oh yeah, and before I do that, you can also remove your Pomodoro folder like this, and you'll have an empty directory. And that's what I want to do right now, because create React app is going to create its own directory for you. Anyways, let's go back to this. Npx create React app, and then we're going to give it a name, and I'm going to call this one Pomodoro. And if you just give it a while, it's going to create an application. You're going to press Y to proceed, and it's going to start downloading all of the packages that you need to pretty much run React. So there's a lot of JavaScript packages in the background that are used as dependencies. And you're going to figure out, as you continue to develop more applications, that a lot of your libraries and frameworks rely on a lot of npm packages and dependencies that you'll install. So I'm going to pause the video. It might take a while. So I don't have the fastest internet, so I'll save you some time here. Oh, never mind. Looks like it. Nope. False alarm. See you soon. So once all your packages are finished downloading, you'll see that you have some commands that you can run right here. So npm start is what we're going to use for the most part, and you have npm test and npm run build. These are actually the two that we're really going to use throughout this project. So keep those in mind. This bundles the application, so it's ready for production, essentially deployment, and this is just for development purposes. That way we can kind of get the code up and running and simulate what most people would see. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and follow these suggested commands for the most part. So we're gonna, oh, I spelled Pomodoro wrong. All right, so from the command line, you can do code dot, and it should pop up your VS Code, application. And yes, you want to trust the authors because it's a fresh package. Make sure you actually download the appropriate packages that you want to use. Otherwise, you're just gonna have like a really, really hard time. All right, so you don't have to pay attention to any of these things right here. You can just ignore that. And you can also, from here, run a command line. And I rather do that because it kind of helps us see what we're doing. So we're going to go down to View and Terminal right here. And I'll just kind of blow this up. And I'm going to use Control Plus so I can zoom in into the command line a little bit better. And that way for you guys that are watching this video, it makes it a lot easier. All right, cool. So we're on the terminal here. And what we can do is we can do npm start to start our application. And if you have Windows, you'll get this pop up. Just go ahead and allow it since it's using network connections. And you'll see that I just popped up right here. And I'll go ahead and just kind of slide this over on my tab list here. What? Edge cannot do this? This is so whack. Oh, because this is a private. That's why. That's why. Cool. All right, so here we are. This is our base React application. And the reason why we're using React, we don't need to use React, but it does a really cool thing here where everything is reactive. So you can use use states, and it kind of does this thing where it gives you live feedback from the document. So React creates this virtual document view, and I'm totally butchering it. But essentially, it abstracts the document, which is essentially what you see from, for example, right here, if I do Control-Shift-I, inspect, and I go to, where is it? The source. You'll see that you have a document right here. Wait, nope, that's not it. How do you use source with this? View page source. So you'll see that you have this document, this HTML document. And from here you have your body, and this is exactly everything that is being rendered to create this. Now, most traditional HTML pages, you'll see like from the body, you'll have like the div and everything. You'll have like a format of essentially like what your body, your nav bar is. But what React does is it abstracts it over to, and it renders it based on what your viewer wants to see. I know that it doesn't really make too much sense right now, but if you kind of go into like the whole technical, what it really is, it's even more confusing. But essentially, React is just abstracting the HTML and just rendering it with JavaScript based on what you're requesting. So it's pretty dynamic, and it does it real time, so you don't have to reload your browser page. So that's pretty much in a nutshell. There's some little nuances here and there where you don't have to, where it knows what you're trying to re-render and when things are updated. So it just refreshes that specific block. So if we were to change a quick start, it would just change quick start. You wouldn't have to re-render the entire document. It would just this little component. And components is another thing that React does. Anyways, so outside the abstraction, let's get to working on our Pomodoro timer. So what we know about the Pomodoro timer is that we have intervals of 25 minutes, and then we have breaks of 5 minutes. And essentially what we want to do is we want to repeat the process 4 times into a longer break. So once you do 4 intervals of 25-minute study times or work sessions, essentially you get a long break, which could be like a 25-minute break or something like that. But in between these 25-minute breaks, this 25-minute work in focus modes, we're going to take 5-minute breaks. And there's like a science and study behind why you do that. I won't go into it here, but if you follow and like and subscribe, you'll figure out some of productivity techniques that you can use and utilize at home. Anyways, and so that's pretty much what we're going to do. And it's pretty simple. There's really some very small components that we really have to keep track of. So let's go ahead and get started with actually messing with our React app. So right now it's like this. So if you're familiar with HTML, so you can see that we have like a background with a color with some CSS styling. And we have some like a paragraph here and then a link. And I'm assuming this is a SVG that's rotating. So that's really cool. Not really what we want to do. So what we're going to go is we're going to go to the index. And this is where our entire application essentially resides. So this is the React DOM. And it's creating a document. So this is like the root document. This is the source HTML that is going to be rendered. We're importing CSS here, and we're importing app. So we do want to use an app. Web Vitals, we don't really care about Web Vitals. So we're going to go ahead and just remove this report Web Vitals, and we can just delete this from right here. And ignore the neighbors and everybody outside. This apartment has crappy walls. So we're going to remove the CSS as well. We do not need the CSS, and that's not how we're going to format. And let's resave here. Cool. All right. So it'll give you those errors if you can't find the package. Otherwise, refresh whenever you're moving packages so you can kind of re-render and restart your application. Cool. So React DOM client, yep, React. So this is actually all we need. And if we click on the app, this is the component here. So app is a component that is nestled inside of our root index. So our main application. So this is going to house essentially what is the application. So since we're doing like a single page application style thing, all these little components are going to be switched out from within this app view. So we're going to have like a menu that we're going to want to insert from here and other things, if that makes sense. Cool. So let's go ahead and remove all of this stuff because we don't want this. The header too, cool. And we're just gonna have a div, and we're gonna take away class name because we're not gonna use the built-in styles. All right, cool. So we're gonna go ahead and save this. Remove the CSS file here. Okay, cool. So now we have this. We're gonna nope. And we're going to go ahead over here and create a new folder here, and we're going to call it components. And this is where we're going to put all of our components here. We don't need this logo anymore either. And essentially all of our components that we're going to import into our app are going to be housed over here. I'm going to remove this as well. We don't need this. Okay, cool. So now if we check back on our page, we can see that it's blank because that's how we made it. Cool. So now if you notice that I go back here and I forgot I don't have my my auto completion. I'll just add a paragraph and I'll just put hello world. And we see that we have a hello world. Not too impressive, but hey, that's our first step. We essentially scrapped down all of our scaffold React application and generated our own React application that is blank. So we have a blank slate ready to go. We could change it in a different ways, but I think this is the best way. Why reinvent the wheel? So now we're going to talk about a strategy. One of the things that I've learned throughout development is that you don't want to just start coding. Otherwise, you're going to have a mess and you're going to just have a bad time trying to figure out as you code. And essentially, if you don't have a plan on how to get there, things really won't go the way that you think. Okay, so let's talk about our strategy, right? So what are some key features that we want to have our Pomodoro application use? So we want to make sure that we know how Pomodoro timer works. So essentially what it has to do is it has to keep track of 25-minute intervals. Okay, check. So that's one thing that we wanted to do, keep track of 25-minute intervals. Also the development environment. So we know that we're going to use React. Okay, what other packages are we going to use? So we're going to use Howler.js because we need it to ding whenever those 25 seconds are up and whenever our 5 minutes of break time are up as well. So we also have to make sure that we keep track of our 5-minute intervals of breaks. And then once we complete 4 sets of 25-minute work intervals, we want to take a 25-minute break or maybe even longer. So maybe we can adjust that break time. Also, we're going to be displaying some time. So we may have to use a library called Day.js just to kind of keep track of time in a human readable format. The way computers keep track of time is this really nasty, weird format that works if you're a computer, but if you're a human, it does not work because nobody wants to be telling Unix time, right? So we might have to use that on some later iterations of the application. It just depends on how far we want to go with it. Cool. We also need to keep track of the time, and React has a really cool use state feature where we can kind of hold data structures, like small little data structures and states. And I will go into not into detail, but just kind of give you like the Cliff Notes versions of what use state is and what it's used for, and all the other React hooks that you're gonna see in a modern React application. Um, so implementing the timer functionality, including the start, the pause, and resetting the timer. So that's going to be functions that we want to use. Adding settings for customizing the length of the Pomodoro breaks. Okay, cool. We also want to add the visual display for the timer, such like a progress bar or a clock or something like that. So that's going to be heavy on the CSS side, and maybe we might use some animations. So maybe some animation libraries, because making animations just out of pure CSS is too much of a grind for me. And this is the whole thing. We want to make sure that we can strategize and do this the most, I wouldn't say the most efficient way, but just like the easiest way for somebody that's not a full-time programmer, right? And we're going to do some testing and debugging of the application. And then, of course, once we have the application, it's not going to do us any good if we have to always set up a React development environment. So we're going to deploy it on the cloud. So that'll be your last step. So it sounds like a large laundry list, but we'll go ahead and break it down. So congratulations, you made it through the very tedious first bit of setting up your environment and just kind of getting the general direction of where we want to go. So the next video that we're going to have is going to go into detail about just kind of shaping the skeleton for a project, for a React application. So I'll see you there if you like this video, and if you don't want to miss out on this project, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. I would really appreciate that, and it'll give me more motivations to make more motivation to make more cool videos like this. All right, see you there. Just